Well, thank you for that very warm double reception when we arrived and then there just now. Look, I want to start what is a very important day for our party and the celebration of launching a really important manifesto on quite a sombre note, and I hope you bear with me. Because there are thousands of young women across Scotland today who will have gone to work, college or university. They'll shortly be sitting with their friends at college or university in the canteen or at work, and they'll be looking forward to a Friday night out together. Thousands of young women like Karen Buckley. And my thoughts, and the thoughts of everyone in the room today, go out to Karen's family. None of us can in any way imagine the pain and horror that you're going through. Glasgow and Scotland stands with you in your moment and in your years of grief. Now, of course, we don't know exactly what happened to Karen yet, and we support the police in their efforts. But it should never be too much to ask that our streets and our cities are safe and that women should always be able to walk them free from fear or free from threat. Now, moving on to the important work of unveiling what is, I think, a remarkable manifesto. And of course, it started with introductions from two remarkable women, two great fighters for their communities, and Mel and Margaret. Margaret's the perfect candidate for this part of Glasgow. Someone who's strong, who's fierce, who will always stand up, and who I'm terrified of. And look, Mel's a new generation of Labour politicians with such experience in campaigning against poverty globally, and will bring that experience to Glenrothes, and as she says, the villages of Fife. Can't miss them out. But it's also great to be joined by Douglas Alexander. There are candidates here from all over the country, of course there are, but Douglas is doing such a brilliant job as our general election coordinator at a UK level, and it's great that you're here, Douglas, in supporting our campaign. Now, as Margaret has said, and as you all know, we meet here in the East End of Glasgow. And what a fantastic venue. And what brilliant memories, as Margaret has spoken of last summer, of young Scots triumphantly standing to receive their medals as the saltire rose behind them. Some of the old images of the East End are also long gone, as we know. But too many of the past scars remain in our communities and in some of those families. In the industrial age, there was an excuse for the East End of cities being poorer, as the poor lived under the pollution blown there by the prevailing winds, not just here in Glasgow, but in many other cities. In modern times, as far as we have come, the economic disadvantage of the East End of cities like Glasgow has no rationale and no justification. We can see through our own eyes, around us all across the city, and in this part of the city in particular, how far Glasgow has travelled and how much has been achieved by the people of Glasgow, supported by the previous Labour government and backed by the current Labour Council. Labour, like this city, has always been driven by a sense of change, of social justice and of equality. We never stop to congratulate ourselves on what has been done and achievements of the past. We always ask ourselves, what's our next challenge? What's next? What's next to be achieved? And today we set out the next stage of our party and our country's journey. We set out a plan in our manifesto that represents the biggest assault since 1945 and the injustices that hold back too many people in this community and in working class communities all across our great country. In this document, we look at our country, we look at our economy, and we look at our party with fresh eyes. Where the last Labour government fought for a minimum wage, the next Labour government will fight for a living wage. Where the last Labour government won the right to time off work, the next Labour government will win the right for regular time at work. Where the last Labour government fought for a Scottish Parliament the next Labour government will empower this Parliament and fight to protect the Barnett formula, the state pension and the strength and solidarity of the United Kingdom. And in so doing, we know that in the East End and across Scotland, people are desperate for change. In a hard-fought Scottish election and in the closest UK general election in my lifetime, it will soon be time for the voters to decide, for the people in charge to take charge. So today we put our plan before the people. We set out how we will meet their desire for dramatic and radical change. Our case is that in this election, more than any other, the votes we cast in Scotland will make a difference in deciding who governs the whole of the United Kingdom. But more than that, using those votes for a Labour government will make a difference to the lives of working people in Scotland, here and beyond. We go into the final few weeks of this election campaign clear that the way to guarantee the end of a Tory government is to vote Labour, rather than to gamble on the messy outcomes of a hung Parliament. And we want people to vote Labour out of a sense of hope, not just out of a sense of anger at David Cameron and George Osborne. You know, cynicism is easy in politics. Scepticism is straightforward in politics. And that sense of cynicism is an easy way to win votes, but only makes real change all the more difficult. At this election, our opponents have spent much of the time encouraging that sense of hopelessness. The SNP's campaign has been built on the idea that all politicians, all other politicians, are all the same, instead of offering ideas that can make a real difference. They want to persuade you that Labour and the Tories are exactly the same, and that only nationalism can make the difference. Nothing could be further from that truth. Nationalism didn't create our National Health Service. Nationalism didn't create our welfare state. Nationalism never created rights for working people. Nationalism didn't transform the lives and housing conditions of people across Scotland's cities. All of that was done by Labour governments, and more often than not, it was opposed by Scottish nationalists who now seek to steal our clothes. And it's often said that imitation is the best form of flattery. Well, that type of flattery will get Scotland absolutely nowhere if it ends up in another Tory government. Because the leader of the SNP says now that as she did before the last general election, that they don't think it matters whether it's a Tory or a Labour government. Think back. In 2010, they told people in England to vote Lib Dem, to deny Gordon Brown, a proud fellow Scot, a majority. And the result, of course, is that some people listened to them. Some people got a Lib Dem MP, but we all got a Tory PM. This time round, they want England to vote anyone but Labour again. And preferably, they want them to vote Green. As if in voting Green, we won't end up with a blue again. Whatever it adds up, no matter which way you cut it, the SNP aren't a proxy for a Labour government. They're the roadblock to a Labour government. And if the past few years of Tory austerity haven't made that clear, that the mistake the SNP made the last time, encouraging people to vote against a Scottish Labour Prime Minister, then they simply don't want to see the difference. The manifesto that we set out today is a positive programme for Scotland based on Labour values, on Labour's priorities and on Labour principles. Vote for it or reject it, but be in no doubt it is the core of our values. Nobody should believe that there's another way to deliver the same values, those same priorities and principles, by voting for anyone other than Labour. A Labour government is what our country needs. if we are to deal with the growing inequality that scars so many of our communities, of the type that I've spoken about throughout this campaign and will continue to talk about right up until polling day. I've spoken about the workers left living on temporary lives, on zero-hours contracts, left hanging on the telephone, waiting to get a text or a call to tell them whether they're needed for work that day. That's no way to treat proud workers in a nation like ours. I've spoke up for the hard-pressed working mums and the hard-pressed working dads who walk past the doors of fully stocked supermarkets on the way to a food bank to feed their children. I'll speak up, and I'll continue to speak up, for the young Scots who are reluctantly reassessing their ambitions for their own future as they scroll through the pages of the jobs market. And we've talked before about the reasons we need change. All politicians do it, but we also know that all talk is cheap, where real change isn't. So we stand not as a party of protest, but as the best chance of real change for Scotland. We stand as the alternative party of government. We will secure the best deal for the new borrowing powers for the Scottish Parliament so we can invest in the future. But today we don't offer a free and easy list of policies because we set out our agenda, our ambitions, and how we will pay for them. Every new policy in our manifesto is costed. None requires additional borrowing. These are not just words. This is a plan of action. The big idea running through our plan is that Scotland succeeds when working families succeeds. So the plan we present today offers not just a change to our countries and how they are governed, it offers a change to how our economy works and how we reward our working people. We cannot go on with the rewards for the few and the insecurity for the many. We want working class Scots to earn more per hour and have more regular hours. So we will raise the minimum wage to at least £8 an hour to end poverty pay. And we will, despite the opposition of the Tories, aided and abetted by the Nationalists in the Scottish Parliament, use the full power of the Scottish Government to promote a living wage for more workers so that 500,000 Scots can get a wage rise. We'll ban the exploitative zero-hours contracts that leave workers hanging, as I said, on the telephone, unable to plan their lives or to support their families or pay their bills. Now, some of you travelling here this morning may not have heard Ian Duncan Smith talk about this, but he's come up with a novel idea on zero-hours contracts that have grown so much under his government and while he's been in charge of welfare. He said that we should just re-term zero-hours contracts, I've got it here, as flexible contracts. That's one way of dealing with it. One way of avoiding exploitative zero-hours contracts is a Tory way to redefine it. But you know, Scottish Labour and the Labour Party more generally has a better way. Let us not redefine these exploitative zero-hours contracts. Let's banish and ban them forever so that no one is treated in that way when they go to work. And as well as earning more, we want the wages of working class Scots to go further. So, despite the opposition of the Tories, and again cheered on by the Nationalists in the Scottish Parliament, we will bring forward controls on rent increases, a freeze on energy bills, and stronger rules in the way in which energy companies operate. And we will, yes, Mr Souter, we will regulate the bus companies too. We will end the bedroom tax and use the money saved to end the need for food banks in Scotland. No mum or no dad